the silent power within you. There is a kind of fatigue that sleep cannot fix, a kind of restlessness that no vacation can resolve. You wake up tired, not because your body is weak, but because your soul has been leaking energy in ways you cannot even name. You try to rest, but your mind is already plugged into the world before you have even noticed your own breath. You check messages, notifications, opinions, demands, distractions. You belong to everyone but yourself. And then, quietly, without a sound, your strength begins to fade. Not with a crash, but with a slow and invisible decay. That is how power is lost, not in moments of battle, but in moments of unconscious surrender. You explain, you justify, you try to be understood by people who are not even listening. You react, you respond, you perform. You speak so much, yet feel so unheard. And somewhere deep inside, a question begins to rise. What would happen if I stopped talking and started listening to myself? That question is the beginning of something sacred. It is the doorway to the most profound kind of power there is, the silent kind. Welcome to Buddha Story. If you are here, listening not just with your ears but with your attention, then you already know that something must change. This is not a video for entertainment. This is an invitation to step back from the noise and to step into your own depth. Because everything you are looking for is not out there in the opinions or reactions of the world. It is hidden inside your ability to hold stillness like fire in your chest. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is presence, distilled and pure. In ancient Buddhist lore, there is a story of a great sage. Let us call him Aniruddha. He once stood before a gathering of thousands, but instead of delivering a powerful speech, he simply held up a single blossom. No words, just a gesture. The crowd was confused. Some whispered, some looked around. But one disciple, Kalen, smiled. He saw beyond the gesture. He received what could not be spoken. And Aniruddha, without breaking his silence, looked at him and nodded. In that moment, everything was transmitted. The truth does not need to be shouted. It needs to be seen. Why does this matter to you? Because in your life, there are too many words and too little meaning. Too many performances and too little truth. Your presence has been diluted because you have forgotten your center. You have forgotten how to be still. And the world keeps pulling you further away from yourself, rewarding you only when you give it all your attention. But your attention is not meant to be scattered. It is meant to be sacred. And your silence is not weakness. It is your weapon. It is your doorway back home. True discipline begins here, not with external control, but with internal clarity. It is the discipline of not responding to what does not deserve your reaction. It is the power to watch chaos and not become it, to feel the pull of distraction and remain unmoved, to carry your energy like a king carries his crown, not flaunting it, but never dropping it. This kind of strength does not come from willpower alone. It comes from reverence, from honoring your energy so deeply that you stop leaking it into everything that screams for it. In the old texts, there is the story of a traveler who approached a forest hermit known as Tenzin. The traveler said, "Master, I have read every book, followed every method, but I am still lost." Tenzin did not respond. He simply pointed to the ground and sat. The traveler, frustrated, began speaking more, asking more questions. But Tenzin remained silent. Hours passed. The wind shifted. A bird sang. The sun moved across the sky. Eventually, the traveler, exhausted, sat in silence beside him. And in that stillness, something broke open. He finally heard not the master, but himself. That is the purpose of silence. Not to suppress, but to strip away the noise until your own voice can return, until your breath becomes your guide, until your thoughts no longer own you. And you remember, power is not how loud you speak. It is how clearly you move. Power is not how much you say. It is how much you see without needing to speak. Modern life has forgotten this. We live in a performance culture. Everyone is talking. Everyone is selling. Everyone is trying to prove. But the ancient ones, the real masters, they knew that presence speaks louder than any performance. You do not need to argue to be right. You do not need to shout to be heard. When your energy is aligned, you enter a room and everything shifts. Not because of what you say, but because of what you are. So ask yourself, how often do you waste your words? How often do you explain, not because it is needed, but because you are afraid of being misunderstood? How often do you check your phone just to feel seen, even if it costs you your peace? These are not small habits. These are soul leaks, and they will take everything from you if you do not take yourself back. Your mornings matter. Your silence matters. The way you carry your breath in the first hour of the day will set the tone for everything that follows. That is not spiritual advice. That is energetic reality. And until you start treating your silence like sacred ground, you will continue to feel exhausted without knowing why. So begin here. Begin now. Not with more effort, but with more reverence. Close your eyes. Listen. Not to the world, but to yourself. Your body knows what you have ignored. Your breath knows what your mind has silenced. And your energy is waiting to return to you. You do not need to prove anything. You need to remember who you are when the world is no longer watching. If this message has reached you, let it settle. And if you have found value in it, consider subscribing to Buddha Story so we can continue sharing teachings that matter. Teachings that help you reclaim your presence, not just your performance. Before we continue, here is a question for your heart. Which kind of power do you carry more often? A, the power of reaction, responding to the world instantly, constantly, emotionally. B, the power of stillness, choosing your response with clarity and inner command. Comment A or B below. Your answer might just reveal what you need to reclaim next. Breaking reactivity, building a purposeful life. Most people believe they are making decisions, but in truth, most people are simply reacting. Reacting to messages, reacting to moods, reacting to expectations they never questioned. From the moment they open their eyes in the morning, their minds are no longer their own. They belong to whatever grabs their attention first. And that is where everything starts to fall apart. Not in the chaos outside, but in the absence of a center within. We do not lose ourselves in a single dramatic collapse. We lose ourselves slowly, gently, one distraction at a time. One unnecessary reply, one meaningless scroll, one unspoken boundary crossed. It is not the loud moments that steal our soul. It is the subtle ones, the ones that seem harmless, the ones we never notice. And by the time we do, our direction is scattered. Our energy is diluted. Our inner fire burns low, not because it died, but because we stopped protecting it. There was once a man named Soren who spent years ching everything: business, validation, relationships, and the next big opportunity. He was fast, ambitious, always available. But over time, his spark began to dim. He could not understand why he felt tired all the time. He blamed his work. He blamed his lack of motivation. Until one morning, something inside him snapped, not in anger, but in silence. He turned off his phone, sat down, and did nothing. For the first time in years, he listened to the stillness. And in that stillness, he met the truth. He had built a life around responding to everything but himself. That day, Soren made a vow, not to do more, but to respond less, not to chase success, but to protect presence. And slowly, something began to shift. He started his mornings without his phone. He said no without guilt. He stopped explaining. He gave himself 1 hour each day that belonged to no one else. It was not dramatic. It was not spiritual. It was practical. And it was powerful. What Soren discovered is something the Buddha spoke of centuries ago. We become what we repeatedly do. If your daily rhythm is built around external triggers, your life will never be your own. You will always be playing a role in someone else's script. But if you choose to become intentional, even in the smallest ways, your path changes. There is a word in the ancient texts called yoniso manasikara. It means wise attention. Not just any attention, wise attention. Deliberate, rooted in purpose. The kind of attention that does not chase noise but seeks meaning. It is not enough to be aware. We must become aware with direction. That is what breaks the pattern of reactivity. Not discipline for discipline's sake, but discipline rooted in the deep knowing that your life cannot be given to the world before it is given to yourself. You do not need to control the world. You need to stop letting it control you. That begins with asking one simple question each morning. Whose rhythm am I following today? Mine or theirs? If the answer is always theirs, then you already know why you feel lost. The path home is not complicated. It is just uncomfortable. It asks you to step away from the familiar dopamine rush of instant replies, constant updates, endless checking. And it asks you to return to something that cannot be downloaded: your breath, your body, your being. In one of the old monasteries, there lived a teacher named Ananda. His students were eager, brilliant, well-read, But none of them were progressing in their practice. One day, a quiet woman arrived. She was not eloquent, she was not fast, but she asked only one question, again and again. Is this necessary? Before she spoke, she paused. Before she responded, she breathed. Over time, she became the most centered person in the monastery, and the others began to follow her rhythm. One student asked the master, "Why does she advance while we remain the same?" The master replied, "Because she no longer lives in reaction. She lives in reflection." That is the path, not the noisy path of proving, pleasing, performing, but the silent strength of someone who chooses what deserves their energy. When you no longer give your time to what weakens you, you begin to remember what strength feels like. And that strength does not come from doing more. It comes from doing less, on purpose. Every time you say yes to something you do not mean, you say no to something that could have mattered. Every time you explain yourself to someone who does not listen, you betray your own knowing. Every time you stay in a conversation that drains you, you abandon your inner sanctuary. And every time you wake up and give your first moments to the world instead of your own center, you begin the day lost. What if, instead, you chose differently? You woke up, and the first thing you did was return to your breath. You moved slowly, not because you were lazy, but because you were aligned. You protected your first hour like it was sacred, because it is. You let the world wait. You remembered that your energy is not infinite, and so you spent it wisely. You responded to fewer things, but you did them better. You checked in with your inner world before logging into the outer one. This is not productivity advice. This is spiritual hygiene. You clean your house. You brush your teeth. But do you protect your energy? Do you filter your focus? Do you nourish your soul before giving it away? Because no matter how loud the world becomes, it cannot own someone who is grounded. The winds may blow, but the mountain does not move. And you are that mountain, if you remember who you are beneath the noise. The truth is, very few people will understand this path. They will call it selfish. They will call it detached. But the ones who walk it know. It is not detachment. It is devotion. Devotion to clarity. Devotion to what matters. Devotion to becoming someone who no longer needs the world's chaos to feel alive. You are not here to respond to everything. You are here to build something solid, something steady. And that kind of life is only built when you step out of reactivity and into responsibility. So today, ask yourself, what am I building? A life of noise or a life of presence? Am I reacting to the world or am I directing my path? The answer will reveal everything. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. From that moment on, everything becomes a choice. Choose wisely.